Dan Simons, welcome to Partnering Leadership. I'm thrilled to have you on with me.
Mahan, I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to a robust conversation.
It is going to be a great conversation. I've heard a lot about you. I've seen your impact in the community. And one of our mutual friends, David Gardner, I interviewed him back in December 2020. Dan defines purpose driven. So, want to get to some of those. But before I get there, would love to know a little bit about your upbringing, Dan, and how your upbringing impacted the kind of person you became.
I grew up in Boston. I lived in the same house that my parents brought me home from the hospital to, and I was raised in that home. And my parents stayed together forever, and my mom's still alive, and she still lives in that house. So, home is home. I'm 50 years old, and I still feel like I'm in my upbringing. I don't know what I'll do when I grow up, but when I think of home, I think very fondly of it. And I'm fortunate that my parents moved to this country, and so I got to have really the best of both worlds, to see the world through the eyes of my parents as immigrants to this country, and then I had the opportunities to be born here and be raised here.
Yeah, and I wonder that first generation upbringing, Dan, how did that shape your worldview?
From the very beginning, I, I guess I always understood, or was just made to understand, that the United States wasn't at the center of the universe. And that was neither taught to me in a negative way or a positive way. It was never overtly taught to me. It was just, when you have a family that has experienced the globe, um, the thing's a circle. There is no center of it. There is no place that is more important than any other. And I feel like that was a real gift that my parents gave me. And I think they instilled in us the same thing about us as individuals. We're also not at the center of the universe. We're a little speck here doing our thing wherever we're doing it. And so I guess that's how I look at the first generation American experience for me.
Obviously, Founding Farmers is pretty focused on its people also and values diversity of people, whether some of that understanding impacted the focus that you place on people and diversity of people.
I'm sure it does. You know, I was just raised the way that I was raised, and I know you hear phrases in business like, people first, or people are the most valuable asset. When those phrases come out of the boardroom, they're a strategy. They're often relatively hollow. I think I was just raised and came up in a family where it really mattered how we felt, it mattered what we did, and it mattered tremendously how we made other people feel. And so I just brought into my business career the only thing I know how to do, which is to ask people how they are, and then, to shut up and really listen.
And now I know also in your upbringing, there was a period of time in middle school that you had been bullied in school.
Yeah, this is one of those things that, looking back, I'm so fortunate that it happened. And, when going through it, it was awful. It was just a phase, in sixth grade where, I lost my friends. I got picked on. Sort of all of a sudden, people were making fun of me because my parents spoke with a different accent. Um, I was Jewish, which, there weren't many Jews where I was. And these things just sort of came to a head, social dynamic. And for 3 months or so, it was a hard time, scared to go to school, crying, kids making fun of me, fighting, getting in fights, and just, really outnumbered, and, stressful for my parents. They didn't really know how to help. Um, and, in the 70s, bullying wasn't really something that teachers or administration or adults like got involved
Yeah.
in. And but I made new friends. I got through it. I saw the kids who reached out to me and were helpful to me. and they were kids that probably would have been to some degree invisible to me before, and before that. And so it's good to know what it's like to be the one that's hurt. It's good to know what it feels like to be the recipient of unpleasantness. There's a lot you can do with that. I guess it might make some people meaner themselves, and for me it made me forever appreciative and aware of, I'm devoted to the underdog. um and I don't know if I would have been that way had I not taken some serious kicks when I was down.
Incredible example, Dan, of humanity that experience brought out in you, and you relating to other people better as a result of it, rather than holding on to grudges and resentments. You help that experience make you a better person and now better leader as a result.
Mahan, I still remember several of the kids who befriended me, and there was one kid who I wasn't friends or not friends with prior. Just we didn't really know each other, and he watched what was happening and was willing to let me, sit next to him on the bus, or my mom would drop me off at his house in the mornings before school so I could go to school on his bus. And that at that age, for a kid to be that insightful and caring and put himself at risk, for a kid who prior to that wouldn't necessarily have done that for him. And that lesson that I took from that was, I don't know, it's as poignant today as it was, all those years ago.
What a beautiful experience. Now, as you were going through that, obviously things that formed you and your views for the rest of your life, I highly doubt you wanted to grow up and become a restaurateur. So, at what point did you decide you wanted to actually open up a restaurant and go into that business?
It is funny, some folks probably grow up going to restaurants all the time. In my family, we ate dinner at home, and we would go out to, what we considered a fancy restaurant, or, a nice restaurant, maybe twice a year. Something special. Other than that, we just ate at home. Um, so I didn't get this restaurateur bug when I was young by any means. Um, I started working in bars and restaurants when I was in college, and I fell in love with a few things. I learned that I loved being at the party, but I really loved sort of organizing the party. I liked cleaning up. Um, I liked being at the party, but being in control. I liked being at the party, but being the one who left with money in my pocket instead of broke. So, I learned to earn, I learned to clean, I learned to, most of the time keep my head on straight. So there were a lot of things that I think gave me that restaurant bar bug early. And then it just sort of manifested and grew into a real career desire. And I feel really fortunate for those early work experiences.
Yeah, but it sounds like that first restaurant didn't work out so well.
The first one I owned, no, what a disaster. My business partner and I, and he's still my business partner today. We do everything together. Michael Vakurovich. Um, our first restaurant just failed. I mean, a total epic business disaster. You get to the point you're gonna, oh, we finally know what we're doing. I was 31 years old, or 32, 33 years old. We finally started our own business, got a decade plus of experience working for other people. We think we know what we're doing. We raised money from friends and family. And we just fell flat on our face and lost $1 million that we didn't have but signed for personally, destroyed the capital from friends and family and fools, I guess. And then spent the following 8 years paying back on banknotes and on the landlord lawsuit settlement. So yeah, I obviously really love this business because it I know how to get kicked when you're down, and this business sure did that to me too.
Now, Dan, most people when they burn their hands, they don't touch the stove again. What made you want to go back and open up another restaurant?
I think I'm a little competitive with myself. If I touch the stove and it burns my hands, I want to figure out, what gloves do I need to get my hands around the throat of that stove and get that stove to do what I want. So I also don't really know how to give up. I sort of figure if I'm not dead, I'm still in the fight. So as you know, Mahan, leadership or entrepreneurship or whatever journey, no one is great at it. It's just about just keep going. And really, I studied martial arts for several years. They say, what does it take to get a black belt? Just keep going, right? So just keep going.
But where does that come from in you, Dan? What is it in you that makes you hold on and become even more persistent to achieve that goal?
Nature, nurture, I don't know. I mean, my parents, I'm just not one to complain about my journey. My mom's parents fled Austria just before the Nazis rolled in. My mom was born along the way. There were Austrian Jews get to England, while sort of people are dying and being murdered around them. And then my mom at whatever, 6 or 7 years old or 8 years old was, sent away from her parents to live in the countryside during the Blitz. And I just think like what I have experienced is nothing compared to that hardship that, you know, my parents saw, and then, the courage to to move to another country. And by the way, there's so much more hardship out there for other people around the world than my parents faced. So I have always somehow been able to see my own challenge in the context of the challenges that other people face. And so when I look at it that way, I think, all right, not so bad. Let's get after it. Like lots of other people go through lots more and don't give up. So I'm sure as hell not about to give up.
So as you got after it in 2008 with your partners, you started founding Farmers, which is really focused on building community and truly mission driven. Why start a mission driven restaurant, which almost even to this day, to some people might sound counterintuitive?
Well, this is really one of those sort of coming togethers that, serendipity, call it good luck, say that people make their own luck. I don't know. But whatever caused this coming together, my partner Michael and I, our first restaurant had failed. We knew we wanted to do more restaurants. We developed our restaurant and hospitality consulting business, and we were trying to figure out our next restaurant. And then we got connected with this group of farmers from North Dakota, literally the North Dakota Farmers Union. And they had a desire to do a farmer owned restaurant, and they obviously had their reasons. We had a vision for the kind of restaurant that we wanted to do next. And we put together their vision and their DNA and their capital with our ability, vision, and really intertwined it. It wasn't their idea and our idea, it became the idea. And so I think from great seeds grow great trees. And I couldn't have done it alone. It's not just my seed, it's me and Michael and the farmers of North Dakota and several other and lots of other, hundreds of other family farmers. And so we sort of fused together this DNA. And that's what planted the seed that became founding farmers. And so I do believe that you things grow from the seed from which they're planted. And so this was a really good seed. It was always about putting mission over profit, but still in order to make profit and to do it in that multi-stakeholder way. And it has served us well.
I also know you're a big advocate for conscious capitalism. When did you get introduced to that concept? Because it's something that you advocate and you also show through your restaurant how all kinds of organizations, not just the professional services or tech firms, can have purpose and can have a service attitude to a broader group of stakeholders, not just their owners and shareholders.
It's always been clear to me that business can elevate humanity. And I had, over the past decade or so, started to, refer to myself or my and my partner's view of business as a mindful or conscious way of doing business. And one day I was speaking at an event just a few years ago, and I referred to myself as a conscious capitalist. And then after the event, my now friend, and the only person that I can refer to as a complete fool, David Gardner of the Motley Fool, approached me and said, oh, Dana, it's nice to meet you. I heard you talk about, mention, call yourself a conscious capitalism. That's great. Are you involved with the movement? Did you enjoy the book? And I said, what book? Like, what are you talking about? And we just had this really funny conversation. He's like, well, you use this phrase and it's a book. I said, I didn't know it's a book, but awesome. And so that was just about 3 years ago, I think. And so David introduced me to the board and Conscious Capitalism Inc. And so I met folks and I read the book, and that's what got me involved. And I have really thrown myself into, spreading the word. I think it is a fantastic way to generate return for investors, while simultaneously valuing whatever it is you determine are your stakeholders. And for me, that's the planet, that's American family farmers, that's the local community, that's the mental health of my employees, that's the kind of the mental wellness of my partnership with Michael V. And so I look at all of these things as stakeholders. So as I make decisions, as we make decisions, we try to do it in a balanced way. And so teaching other folks how to do this it's really rewarding.
I'm glad to hear that David is the person that pulled you into this. He's one of those individuals that helps anyone he interacts with be better as a result. And I always feel a couple of inches taller when I am with David. So he has a way of helping you become smarter and feel better about yourself. So I've learned a lot from him too. Now, with respect to your focus on the community, you don't only talk about it, Dan, which is one of the things I love. You do a lot, whether it is by being a sustainable restaurant and really focusing in on that, or partnering with organizations like DC Central Kitchen and launching things like Our Last Straw. So there's a lot that you have done. What is it with respect to Last Straw? Talk a little bit about that. And again, why would a restaurant and a restaurateur be the leader of this cause and this movement?
My carbon footprint, my personal damaging impact to the planet as an individual and as a business person is real and selfish. And, I've got three, relatively young, three young teenage boys. And I think this is their planet. Who do I, or frankly, you or anybody else, who do we think we are meeting our wants, not our needs, but meeting our wants today and diminishing their ability in the future to meet their needs? It's disgustingly selfish. And so I just can't sleep at night simply doing damage. So I look for ways I can be transparent, tell the truth about the negative impact that businesses like mine make, and look for feasible, realistic ways to do both less harm and to solve things permanently. And so single-use plastics, um, it may end up my life's work in some respect of something I try to focus on forever. It is a big problem affecting human health, planetary health. There are billions in profit being made today that I promise you, Mahan, will be looked back at with dismay and disgust that the profit was allowed to be generated with such blatant disregard for the future impact and the future cost. So I wanted to start a nonprofit led by business owners who could raise their hand and say, we care about stuff like this. And there is good regulation and there are things that we can do and we can change our behavior. And some of it might make us generate a bit less profit. Good. Some of it might teach us how to make profit with less, negative impact. So sorry to go on. I get a little fired up about it, but that's my why.
And that is fantastic, Dan, in that you are a leader that truly cares, both with respect to what you do with your own business, in this case, the restaurant group, but also in energizing other leaders, other business leaders to do what is right. Now, as you expanded, as you have this initiative, whether our last straw or getting involved in conscious capitalism, doing lots of great things, then all of a sudden March 2020, we get hit with a pandemic that obviously impacted everyone, most especially restaurants. How did that hit you, and how were you able to handle the pandemic that came?
It Yeah, it was hard. Still hard. Um, but no matter how, I can tell you how it hit me, and I can tell you a bit about how hard it was, but it is still not as hard for me as it was for some of my team, because as scared as I was, and I was scared, scared for my business, scared for my people, scared for my health, scared for the health of my family and those that I care about. I never once thought I'm going to end up homeless. I never once thought if I need medical care, I won't get it. I never once thought if I lose my job, in this case, if I lose my company, that I'll be some version of homeless, penniless, or unfed or uncared for. I I have some savings, not a ton, but I have some. I have a safety net. I mentioned my mom earlier. I'm 50 years old. I could still go live with her, right? I mean, there is a generational support system that some folks have and many, many, many folks don't. So, we went from having over 1,100 employees to having, less than 100. Everybody that we kept had their salary reduced, by 85%. And we were like, well, we're not sure if we can pay anybody. We'll pay you a little bit. Everybody has to do every job, even though we've let all of the hourly employees go. So we laid off 100% of our hourly workforce. And it was like, yeah, do triple the work for third the money, go to work, put yourself in harm's way, be worried about your health, be a frontline worker, and the whole time be incredibly worried about all the people we laid off of, who, by the way, we promised to give free food to until we could get them back to work, even though we're burning cash and we're almost out of money and, and. So there's a lot of tough stories in there. But the best part is we never compromised our principles. We never got selfish. If there's one piece of bread and you got 10 people, you cut it 10 ways, or 9 if you don't want to give yourself some today. And I saw the most selfless acts from everybody that I work with. And so you'll never get me to say I'm glad the pandemic happened, but I'm glad I'm on the team I'm on. If we're going to face this and we got our people back to work and we did it transparently and we published a COVID dashboard when people told me, you're crazy if you tell anybody that you have someone who gets COVID. I'm like, look, I don't know where this pandemic's going. What are we going to do? Lie about it? And everybody, this thing is going to be out there. So, we told the truth. We worked our asses off. We faced the fears. We admitted when we were scared, and we helped each other and we got through it.
What beautiful example of leadership with empathy, Dan. It makes me emotional hearing you talk about the challenges that you face, but also understanding and having empathy for the people that worked for you that had even bigger challenges. And I think that is critical to leaders as they try to lead their organizations, whether it's through this pandemic or post whatever happens. It's that sincere empathy for the people. You also have that empathy for the community because with COVID hitting, with this impact on your own restaurant group, you also redoubled your efforts in working with the community, specifically focusing efforts in Ward 7 and 8 in DC.
When we had to spin up this e-commerce business and we had to create a whole new, I didn't know if restaurants would ever be back. And so we moved quickly to become a market and a bakery, which we have a bakery, but a market and a bakery and a grocery. We were selling everything. And obviously our supply chain stayed intact. And so, and as we spun this business up, and we were bringing our people back to work as delivery drivers. They used to be a cook, now you're a delivery driver. Used to be a bartender, no more bartenders, now you're a delivery driver. I wanted to make sure that folks in Ward 7 and Ward 8, who oftentimes they're out of the delivery zone, right? Um, it's not that far. And frankly, it is a choice how a business sets its delivery zone. And let's be serious, a lot of delivery zones are set with bias and racism and judgment and stereotype in mind, and it's wrong. And so we said, we're going to deliver to everywhere in the city, and we're going to keep our people working, and we're going to get product to folks, who can buy it and afford it. And at the same time, we started donating food every single week to a couple different pastors and their organizations in Ward 8 who, help support and serve a constituency who now are getting less support than ever at the height of the pandemic and can't afford the food. And so, yeah, we managed, even as we were losing all that money, cash flow negative across the board. This is my thing. You can always donate. And, sometimes my weekly donation was, 20 masks, 3 bottles of sanitizer, 4 children's books, and 15 sandwiches. And that's what we would drop off. And if that's what you got, that's what you got. Because when someone else doesn't have it, literally a small bottle of sanitizer, which we were making in our distillery, and a few face masks, you're saving lives. And so we proved no matter how little you have something to give.
So we do need to be a lot more aware and a lot more giving in our attitude, in our approach, as you have been with the community, specifically in the wards that haven't been served as well by a lot of organizations and a lot of restaurants.
Mon, one of the things that I struggle with is that I get annoyed listening to, passionate ideologues on one side or the other of an issue. And I feel that as I listen, people don't seem to want to tell the whole truth. So if someone's advocating for workers, they want to talk about, increasing wages. And then they say like, well, and businesses will be fine. There's, we can afford wages to go up. Okay. And then on, the typical entrenched business interests say, if you raise wages, you'll destroy jobs. Well, okay, maybe. What neither side is telling you is there's elements of truth in both perspectives. There is a middle. Wages should go up. Some jobs will get destroyed. New jobs can get created. It can be a rising tide. It doesn't lift everyone. It does destroy some profits. Some businesses won't get more investors. There's this thing. So what I love about being able to talk about conscious capitalism, it is indeed still about profit, business elevating humanity. look, if everybody out there just started a nonprofit, who's donating to the business? If everybody out there was just on the side of raise wages, well, what about the employer? And so, there's good woven into all of these things. And, a podcast format on a conversation like this is nice because you haven't cut me off there yet. We're not just on the air for 30 seconds, or it's not, well, I've got 300 words in this article to write. These conversations take more nuance, and it's not about the headline. And if you can fit it on a sign, it's probably sort of one-sided, right? I wish that people would advocate on both sides and find more middle ground. I think on everything from wages to social strife to immigration. I don't know, shouldn't you have border security and a path to citizenship? Shouldn't you have effective policing and safety and amazing mental health responders? Like, I don't get it. I don't know. So maybe this is just a therapy session for me, and I'm appreciative that you let me unload all that.
Oh, it's actually exactly to your point, Dan. A lot of nuance is lost when conversations are short and we are looking for highlights. And one of the things I find is that there's a lot more noise in our lives, a lot less signal, and a lot less interactions like this, which is one of the reasons I'm a big advocate and I love podcasts also, where you can hear Dan and see nuance to what he describes, to what the business requires for it to survive and to give back to the community, and what the responsibilities of the business are, rather than just presenting one side or the other in 20-second sound bites. Now, you mentioned that obviously you wouldn't have wished for the crisis and the pandemic, but it did hit. You have evolved as a result. So, as you reflect back on it, I know you're a big advocate of learning both for yourself, for your team members, for your entire organization. When you reflect back a year or two from now, how will Dan and how will the Farmers Restaurant Group be better as a result of the crisis that we didn't choose to go through, but we had to go through?
We learned that we could try many more things and accept that we would be substantially imperfect. And that people talk about failing fast and rapid prototyping. I really had never applied that thinking to our industry because we're on stage every day, and one bad performance and you can lose a customer for life. So I just hadn't thought that those things applied to us. I thought they were too risky. And you buy a piece of software and it's got a glitch. You don't email the company and tell them you hate them and refuse to use the software ever again. You wait for the next uploaded version or downloaded version and you move on. But when we screw up your birthday dinner, people take it really personally. And one restaurant failure is pretty big, like in one dinner, one moment. So I've changed my thinking on that, and I'm willing to be imperfect in order to learn more and test more and explore more. So that, I think we will keep that with us forever. I think it expanded our horizons to see ourselves as providers of food and beverage and experience, not just as a restaurant. So whether we're getting you food and beverage and experience at home or at the curb, or with a virtual happy hour, or with cookbook support via Zoom if you're struggling with one of our recipes. So those things, the diversification of thought, the moving more rapidly, the having the courage to be imperfect on the quest to innovate, those are really some of the silver linings. And we also learned to do without. Virtual meetings, I think, will stick with us for a lot of our stuff. There's some more flexibility with some of our folks who can work remotely. not having managers come in for manager meetings on days off, which has been a hallmark of my industry, for as long as I can remember. So there are some really valuable things for the business and the people and the way that that weaves together that have come out of this.
It is, and they will help us become better and stronger, especially for organizations like yours and leaders like you that keep in mind the purpose and the impact that we all have on the broader community. Now, as I mentioned, I know you're a big advocate of learning, Dan. So, would love to know if, and when you are asked for leadership advice, are there any leadership resources, books, guides that have served you well over the years, or you find yourself repeatedly recommending to others as they want to become more purpose driven leaders? What should they view, read, do?
I'm fortunate to be able to call Tom Dakotas a mentor and a friend. He is a remarkable thinker of organizational structure, organizational heartbeat, and culture building. So his recent book is called Adored. Again, his name is Tom Dakotas. He's written several books. He's absolutely made it, put his stamp on my style or career or thinking. And then I recommend anything by Stephen Covey. I read The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People when I was 21 years old. Um, and that book was as good then as it is 30 years later. I had the good fortune to meet Covey a few times, to present at some of his, bigger events, and I think his books are great. His son also wrote Seven Habits for Highly Effective Teenagers, which I think is great for people at any age. It's easy to absorb. So those are some of the things that places where I really get some learning and guidance.
That's wonderful recommendations, Dan. And I truly appreciate you mentioned that Tom Dakotas is remarkable and has remarkable insights. You are a remarkable leader, showing leaders what it's truly like to be purpose driven, not just to talk about purpose with respect to words that are on a website or are put up on a wall for people to view, but to try to truly be purpose driven through action in the organization and have empathy for our team members and empathy for the broader community. So we are fortunate in the greater Washington, D.C. region to have you as a leader that sets the example through your purpose driven focus and through your empathy. I truly appreciate you joining me in this conversation, Dan Simons.
Thank you so much for having me.